of food security based investment here, and one is by a company called Hassard, a quantum firm in Australian agricultural land. Is quite transparently on their part a food security tactic. Quantar openly declares that it wants to source 1/3 of its food needs from Australia. They were open about it. And they gave evidence of that fact. Given that the population of Qatar is under 500,000, obviously that's not going to disturb us too much. But it does give us a case study. And what Qatar intends is to trade the produce from its Australian farms, and it's bought about 8 or 10 to this point in time, with more to come in conventional markets, diverting product directly to itself only when they have to. And it's that caveat that points to the issue Australia might have down the track. Not from Qatar because it's fairly small scale, but from some of the bigger players. It's got 1.3 billion people. That's China. We're already seeing some food security based interest from China here, and reports suggest China has an interest in taking on all of the development opportunity in the second stage of the Ord River scheme, which is about 15,000 hectares of irrigation. And when we wrote this, there was strong interest in China buying Cubby Station. Perhaps that's gone beyond that stage now, and from reports today it sounds as though FIRB has said they can. So we may not be in any immediate danger of losing our food security, but we do face the very real prospect that vast areas of our most productive agricultural land, and perhaps more importantly, our food processing industry, could be targeted. And the real threat here, in my view, is that it could lead to market distortions as commodities, both raw and processed, are traded in ways that seek to serve the food security of a third party. And that could place our processing, manufacturing and retail industries at a disadvantage if there's not the product there to do. We have to take what we can get, but this sort of scenario where we're subject not just to the vagaries of the market, but to potentially major distortions of the market involving substantial production, could be a very big complication. Now, that's all supposed. But they are the real issues surrounding the food security issue for Australia, to my mind. Not a threat for our ability to feed ourselves, but losing control of major parts of our supply lines to other countries. And what's particularly disturbing in all this is that we are not currently set up to actually know what's happening. That is a really big issue at the moment. We actually don't know. We don't know who's buying it or why they are buying it. The Hassard example of cited earlier is known because it's an investment by a foreign power, and any investment by any state-owned enterprise, which is what they are, has to get Foreign Investment Review Board approval, or Treasury, and that brings it, or the Treasurer, and that brings it out into the open. The same is true for a lot of investment we're likely to see from China. The FIRB will look at it and will know, because almost inevitably be a government connection to any serious funding out of China. But that's not true of investments which are not connected to a state-owned enterprise or a sovereign wealth fund. As long as any single investment in agricultural land is below 244 million, it doesn't affect any scrutiny, and that's obviously every investment. Well, may not be the one we talked about earlier. No Australian agricultural property is going to be valued really at no single entity at 244 million. Cumulative investment below that threshold, even to the level of billions, could occur, but will not attract any scrutiny, and to me that's a real issue in terms of what we might well see over the next few years. What we need to do is have an understanding of who is buying what, where and for what purpose, both in terms of agricultural land and my personal big issue is agribusiness. Simply from the commonsensical point of view of understanding what's happening. It doesn't mean that we should be rejecting investment. The fact is farmers, farm organisations, with few exceptions, with very few exceptions, understand very, very clearly that foreign investment has been one of the key motivators or drivers in the development of Australian agriculture and will remain one of those key drivers. We wouldn't be anywhere near as productive as we are today without foreign investment, and we must keep it coming. Hassard, for example, is proving itself a model investor. It's investing strongly in the properties, it's developing them, it's making them more productive, it's employing local people to run the farms, and it's spending as much as it can in those inputs locally. There is no great push from either industry or politicians to cramp the sort of foreign investment that has been so important of industries in Australian agriculture. But it seems to me quite obvious that given we are in an age, and believe me we are, where global food security is a major issue, that we know what's happening, by whom and why. Put bluntly, and I'll repeat that, put bluntly, the greatest long-term threat to Australian food security in the future is the need for others to ensure their own food security. And that means we need some sort of a register to know who is buying our agricultural land. Queensland runs a register on foreign acquisition, no other state does. The United States has done it for many years. So there's at least a couple of models to work out how we do this. Common sense, as far as I'm concerned, knowledge will ensure that rumour and hearsay won't rule the debate or the policy, and I think that's an incredibly important thing. I think we need to up the ante in relation to agribusiness acquisitions, again simply in terms of achieving much better data. We know that a lot of our food processing sector is already in foreign hands, and that is likely to grow. We need to be more attentive to that area, simply to have better knowledge. We need to lower the threshold. I've always said it makes much more sense if you want to ensure your supply line, and I think rice was the incredible example. Why would you buy 1,000 rice farms to get hold of rice out of Australia when you could buy sun rice and have the lot? And you wouldn't have to produce it, you wouldn't have to put up with the state, local and federal government conscriptions we put on everyone in Australia. It'd be mad. We need to lower the threshold to look at these things, and that includes looking at the cumulative impact of the acquisition of smaller farms, not to stop investment, but to understand the motivation behind the investment and be ready to act if it is seen not to be in the national interest. If we are going to deal sensibly with this food security issue in terms of policy, then ground zero is knowing what's happening, and I think we need to start developing that better data just as soon as we can. I have a very strong belief that if foreign investment is simply replacing an existing situation with a foreign one, then it doesn't actually benefit Australia at all. But however, if it is a new investment or development, as feedlots were, for example, when the Japanese got them going over 30 years ago, then everybody, particularly Australia, is a winner. In fact, I think they only own one feedlot in Australia now, 30 odd years later. On other issues, there is no doubt, and I talked earlier about the fact only productivity had kept Australian agriculture alive and well. There is no doubt that R&D has been the key to success to our agriculture industries and business, and will be important to food security in the future as well, particularly in developing the north of Australia, as we must. And productivity has flattened out in the last decade, and not just because of drought, it actually has. And we have to redouble our effort. And while this government continues to try and scale down R&D, we, the Coalition, will continue to stand by our election promise of last election to increasing research and development. And of prime importance as well as quarantine, it's all tied up together, I believe, as a clean green image of Australian food and fibre has long given us a marketing edge on international markets. So I'm very concerned about the current approach to quarantine in this country, and I probably need another 20 minutes to talk about that. But the Coalition stands by our policy to invest in a flying quad situation to dispatch the skills and the people anywhere in the world, because it's not just an in-house thing, it's when we get into trouble and our exporters get into trouble or get accused of various things overseas, it requires, and it has recently, it requires